Having looked at the evolution of those roles of the board, now let's look at the kind of challenges that boards face at the moment and where their role set might sit in the modern business environment. So the first thing that we have to know is that boards struggle with this balance, trying to balance conformance or legal compliance would be another way of talking about it. Things like their duties and the requirements under the law with actually doing what the company is set up to do, make money or achieve its actually purpose. So what they've got to be able to do is to manage risk very well. That's the heart of value creation, but also do it in a way that's ethical and meets their particular requirements, and in a way that meets their particular requirements under the law. One way of thinking about the role of the board is put forward by Tricker's model. So Bob Tricker was one of the first people who started thinking about corporate governance the way that we do today, and it was only in the 1980s or so, following that Jensen and Meckling turnaround. And so he said really the board has two key roles, one looking at the past and present, the compliance role, and one looking to the future. That's the performance role. But there are both internal and external components to that. So in terms of compliance, internally, the board monitors and supervises particularly management. Externally, though, the board, the directors, are accountable. So they have to satisfy legal requirements. In terms of performance, externally, we've got to look at the external environment and make sure we've got the right strategy. Internally, we try and develop the policy. Remember, policy are a set of guidelines to make sure people internally are acting the way that we want them to do. So that has this element of, even though it's under a performance role, it's about future compliance in terms of what we're after. Now remember, all of this, the board isn't actually doing anything. It's working with and through the CEO and management. So Tricker's model is one of those well-accepted models around some motherhood statements about what directors need to do in terms of their role. There's also a legal perspective on the role of the board. That comes from a very famous case, the AWA case, and Justice Rogers. He set out four key roles of the board. 1, set the goals of the corporation. 2, appoint and or remove and remunerate the CEO. 3, oversee the plans of management for the acquisition and organisation of financial and human resources. I think that's judge speak for oversee the strategy. And 4, to actually review or monitor what's going on. So we can see that for a long period of time, both in the Tricker model and at law, we've had this idea of the board being involved in setting the goals and strategy of the organisation, and then overseeing whether those goals are actually being achieved by the CEO and the management team. Thus, strategy forms the core aspect, or at least at a minimum, understanding the strategy of an organisation relies at the foundation of what a board actually does, and it influences all the other specific activities. What we've got on this slide is a series of tasks or functions that a board would normally do beyond these motherhood statements. So a board defines who to recruit and who to assess. The board makes sure that it's got an appropriate risk management system, a compliance system, directors network, provide access to resources, communicate with key stakeholders, manage crisis, oversee the governance structures. These are all critical things that a board do, but what they need to do within them depends on the strategy of the organisation, right? So it's about focusing your governance system on the strategy and aligning that to ensure that you meet both your compliance and also your performance outcomes. Now, there is no one clear list of roles. you've seen several different ways of presenting it. Tricker's model, the AWA, that last diagram that was presented. Here's another set of roles or tasks that a board would do. But in exercising these roles or tasks, what we find are dilemmas. And Garrett describes 4 of these dilemmas. So on the one hand, a board's supposed to be entrepreneurial, but have prudent control, not take too much risks. They've got to know what's going on in the company, but not be involved in day-to-day operations. They've got to be short-term and long-term in their focus, which is a paradox, and focused on those commercial needs of the business while acting responsibly towards the stakeholders. So often in governance, there is no simple answer to the board's role. It's a matter of managing these dilemmas and paradoxes in the best way possible.